Welcome back to another episode of the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma, and today we have a special episode for you. And today we're going to talk about how to study English alone. This episode will help you improve your listening and writing skills as you hear real-life stories and examples. If you're looking for some motivation to practice English on your own, then you're in the right place. Also, don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoy this episode. We upload new content every day to help you improve your English. So, let's get started. Have you ever thought about how you can improve your English by yourself? Are you the kind of person who enjoys studying alone, or do you prefer having someone else around to practice with? In today's episode, we'll explore some ways to study English effectively by yourself and how I personally practice alone. Let me start with a story about my friend Mark. Mark is an engineer who moved to an English-speaking country for work. He didn't have many friends at first, so he decided to focus on studying English alone. Every day, he would listen to English podcasts, write about his day, and even read books in English. What he noticed after just a few months was incredible. His understanding of the language improved, and he felt more confident in conversations. I remember the first time Mark told me how he studied. He said, "I don't have to wait for anyone. I can learn at my own pace, and I feel more connected to the language." Now, I also want to share how I practice English alone. Every morning, I start by listening to a podcast in English. The key is to focus on the pronunciation and the meaning behind the words. I try to repeat sentences out loud to practice my speaking, and I take notes on new vocabulary. For example, last week I learned the word persistent. It means continuing firmly in a course of action despite difficulty. I use this word in a sentence like, "She's persistent in learning English every day." It's amazing how even a small word like persistent can help me express myself better. After listening, I write a short journal entry in English. I describe my day, my feelings, or something I learned. Writing is a great way to practice grammar and vocabulary. For instance, yesterday I wrote about a small trip I took to a nearby park. I wrote, "I went to the park and saw a beautiful bird. The bird was flying in the sky, and it was so graceful." It made me think about how important it is to take time to enjoy the little things in life. By doing this every day, I see improvements in both my writing and my ability to understand English when I hear it. I also use language learning apps, where I can listen to stories in English. These apps often have simple stories and then questions to test your comprehension. This is a great way to practice listening and writing at the same time. After listening, I write a short summary of what I heard. It's an effective way to improve both skills. And, I always feel a sense of accomplishment after each practice session. It might be hard at first, but with consistency, you start to notice the changes. And that's one of the best parts about studying English alone. You control your progress. So, let me ask you, how do you like to study alone? Do you enjoy listening to stories in English? Or perhaps you prefer reading books or writing in a journal? Let me know in the comments or on our social media. One of my favorite ways to practice is by talking to myself in English. It might sound strange, but it really helps. For example, when I make breakfast, I say things like, "Now I'm cutting the bread. I'm putting butter on it. I'm pouring tea into the cup." This helps me think in English, not just translate from my own language. It trains my brain to use English in real time. I remember my neighbor Daniel. He's a shopkeeper, and he wanted to improve his English to speak with customers from different countries. He told me he started by describing everything around him in English. While cleaning his shop, he would say, "I'm sweeping the floor." The shelves are full of fresh items. I need to check the prices. Slowly, he got used to forming full sentences. After a few weeks, he was able to have short conversations without feeling nervous. Another thing I do is read easy English stories or news articles. After reading, I try to write a short summary in my notebook. For example, last week I read an article about a family who moved to a new town. After reading, I wrote, "The family moved to a small town. They bought a house and started a new life. Their children go to school nearby. They like their new neighbors." Writing these kinds of sentences helps me practice grammar and use the new words I learn. One more tip is shadowing. Have you heard of that? It means you listen to a sentence in English and then repeat it right away, copying the pronunciation and rhythm. I do this with short recordings. I pause after each sentence, repeat it, and try to sound just like the speaker. It's a great way to improve speaking and listening together. My cousin Emily uses this method a lot. She's studying to become a nurse, and she wants to work in an English-speaking country. She listens to English interviews where people talk about daily life or work experiences. Then she repeats the sentences aloud. She says it helps her feel more confident when she has to speak in real life. Let's not forget how helpful it is to ask yourself questions in English. For example, you can ask, "What did I do today?" or "What do I need to do tomorrow?" Then answer them out loud. "Today I studied English and cleaned my room. Tomorrow I will go to the market and write in my journal." These simple exercises build your speaking fluency over time. Also, creating a small English corner at home really helps. This is what I do. I have a table with my English notebook, a dictionary, and a calendar. I write one new word on the calendar each day and try to use it during the day. Today's word was organize, so I said, "I need to organize my desk." And "I will organize my notes after dinner." I also write short letters to my imaginary friend in English. I know it sounds funny, but it really helps me write naturally. For example, "Dear Sarah, today I had a busy day. I woke up early and did my housework. After lunch, I studied English and learned 5 new words. I hope you are having a good day too." Writing like this helps me build longer sentences and express thoughts clearly. Do you do anything similar? Have you ever tried writing letters to yourself or someone else in English? Even if you don't send them, the writing practice is valuable. Let me share a story from a listener named Thomas. He's a farmer and he works alone most of the day. He told me that he listens to English on his phone while working in the field. Then during breaks, he writes down what he remembered. He keeps a small notebook in his pocket. Every evening, he reviews the words he wrote during the day. After a few months, his vocabulary and listening skills improved so much that he could understand radio conversations without any problem. So if you're someone who works alone or spends time by yourself, you can do the same. Listen, write, repeat. Small steps every day can lead to big changes. Keep your notebook close and stay curious about new words and how to use them. Now, many people ask me, "Natasha, how do you stay motivated when you study alone?" That's a great question. When you're alone, it's easy to lose focus or feel lazy. But what helps me is having a clear routine. Every morning, I wake up at the same time, brush my teeth, and sit down at my desk with a notebook and pen. I make a small plan for the day. I write down things like, listen to one English story, write 5 sentences, or learn 3 new words. Keeping things simple and realistic helps me stay on track. Let me tell you a story about my friend Rachel. Rachel is a mother of 2 children. She wants to improve her English because she wants to help her kids with their schoolwork. Every night after her children go to bed, she sits down with a cup of tea and studies English for 30 minutes. She listens to audio lessons, writes new words in her notebook, and practices writing small stories. Last week, she showed me a story. She wrote about her weekend. It was simple but very clear. She wrote, "On Saturday, we cleaned the house. In the evening, we went to visit my sister. On Sunday, I made breakfast for the family and helped my son with his homework." It made me so happy to see how much she had improved in just a few months, simply by practicing alone every day. Something else that works really well for me is using real-life topics in my practice. I don't try to learn hard or complicated things all the time. I just write about my day or talk about my plans. For example, in the morning I might say out loud, "Today I will go to the market. I need to buy vegetables, bread, and eggs." After that, I will clean the house and study English for 1 hour. Then, in the evening, I write in my journal, "Today I went to the market and bought fresh food. I cleaned the kitchen and washed the dishes. I studied English and learned new phrases." This simple speaking and writing helps me get better step by step. Another great method is to practice speaking in front of a mirror. It may feel strange at first, but trust me, it helps a lot. I look at myself and speak clearly. For example, I say, "Hello, my name is Natasha. I am learning English. I enjoy reading and writing. I want to speak English fluently." I watch how my mouth moves and I try to speak with confidence. After a few weeks, I started feeling more comfortable. When speaking to other people, let me give you an example from someone in our English pod community. His name is Andrew. He is a driver and he spends a lot of time alone on the road. He keeps his phone with him and during his lunch breaks he listens to English lessons. Then he talks to himself about what he learned. He says things like, "Today I listened to a lesson about directions. I learned how to say, 'Turn left at the corner' and 'go straight for 2 blocks.'" Then he writes short examples in a notebook he keeps in his truck. He told me that after doing this every day, he can now understand people much more easily and doesn't feel nervous when speaking English with passengers. When I study English by myself, I also practice asking and answering questions. I take a piece of paper and write questions like, "What do you like to eat? Where do you live? What is your favorite season?" Then I answer them out loud or write my answers. For example, "I like to eat rice and chicken. I live in a quiet town near the river. My favorite season is spring because the flowers bloom and the weather is nice." This helps me build useful vocabulary and gives me confidence to speak in real situations. A very useful thing I do is record myself speaking. I use my phone and talk for 1 or 2 minutes about my day or about something I did. Then I listen to it. Sometimes I notice small mistakes and I try to fix them next time. This habit has helped me speak more clearly and confidently. Another story I'd like to share is about John. He is a teacher, and he studies English in the early morning before his work starts. He reads English texts, underlines words he doesn't know, and writes their meanings in his notebook. Then he writes his own sentences using those new words. For example, last week he learned the word improve. He wrote, "I want to improve my speaking skills. I also want to improve my writing." He practices these new words every day, and now he uses them easily in conversation. Sometimes I also write short stories using characters I make up. For example, I wrote a short story about a man named Peter who wants to learn English so he can open a small business. In the story, Peter wakes up early, makes tea for his wife, then sits down and studies English. He reads, writes, and speaks every day. After 3 months, Peter can talk with his customers, write emails, and help his children with homework. Writing stories like this is fun, and it helps you use new grammar and vocabulary in a creative way. Another helpful thing is using photos or pictures. I look at a picture of a house or a market, and I try to describe it in English. I say, "This is a small house. It has a red roof and a garden. There are 2 children playing in the yard. The weather looks sunny." This helps me describe things clearly and use more adjectives. You can do this too by using magazines or photos on your phone. If you like organizing, try making your own vocabulary lists. I have one notebook where I write new words by topic. For example, I have a page for kitchen words, with words like spoon, plate, cup, and stove. Another page is for action words like run, walk, carry, lift. When I study, I choose one page and try to use those words in sentences. It's also good to test yourself. Every few days, I try to remember the words I learned earlier. I close my notebook and try to write as many words as I can from memory. Then I check my list to see how many I got right. This helps me keep the words in my brain. One more thing, don't worry if you make mistakes. When you study alone, it's okay to say something wrong or write a sentence with a mistake. What matters is that you're practicing. Each mistake is part of the learning process. Just keep going and you will get better. One of the things I do every day is write down new phrases I learn. When I hear a useful phrase in an English conversation or read it in an article, I write it down in my notebook. For example, I recently learned the phrase, "get the hang of it." This means to learn how to do something well after practicing for a while. So, I wrote it down, and later I made my own sentences with this phrase. I'm starting to get the hang of studying English every day. Or, at first it was difficult, but now I've got the hang of it. Using these phrases in my speaking and writing is one way I make sure they stick in my memory. I try to use them at least 5 times a day. It's fun because it makes me sound more natural when I talk, and it helps me feel more confident. You can try doing this too. Take a phrase you like, write it down, and use it in a few different situations. It will really help you grow your vocabulary and sound more fluent. Let me tell you about something that helped my friend Luke. Luke works in a small office, and he has to send emails to his clients in English. At first, he wasn't sure how to write emails correctly, but he didn't give up. He started by reading some sample emails online and wrote them out in his own words. For example, one email said, "Dear Mr. Brown, I hope you are doing well. I would like to inform you that your order has been shipped. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions." Luke copied this kind of email structure and wrote similar emails about different topics. After a while, he felt much more comfortable sending professional emails in English. Now he uses the right tone and phrases, and it's easy for him to communicate with his clients. This method of imitating real-life examples can help you too, especially when you need to write in a professional setting. Another method I enjoy is practicing pronunciation. Sometimes I choose a word I find difficult to say, like thoroughly or comfortable. I break the word down into smaller parts and practice each part slowly. Once I feel confident with the individual sounds, I say the whole word at normal speed. I repeat this several times, and after some practice, I feel much more confident saying those words correctly. You can do this with any word that you find tricky. I recommend using online resources where you can listen to native speakers saying the words correctly and then repeat them yourself. Do you ever feel nervous when speaking English? I used to feel nervous all the time, especially when talking to native speakers. But over time, I learned that it's okay to make mistakes. The more I practiced speaking, the less nervous I became. A friend of mine, Sophie, had the same experience. She was shy about speaking English at first because she didn't want to make mistakes. But she started practicing with her husband, Paul, every night. They would sit together and speak only in English for 30 minutes. They talked about their day, their plans, and sometimes they read English books together. Sophie told me that this daily practice helped her feel much more relaxed when speaking, and now she speaks confidently in her job. I think it's really important to practice speaking in a safe environment where you feel comfortable. If you don't have anyone to speak with, you can also practice by speaking to yourself, like I do. One of my favorite practices is using simple audio lessons. These lessons are great because they give you a chance to listen to native speakers and learn how they pronounce words and form sentences. I usually listen to short lessons while I'm walking or doing housework. Sometimes I play them during my commute to work. These lessons help me improve my listening and speaking skills. After each lesson, I repeat what I heard and try to copy the speaker's accent and tone. I also write down any new words I don't know and look them up later. By doing this every day, I feel like I'm constantly improving. Let me share a story from a member of the English pod community, Jack. Jack lives in a small town where not many people speak English. At first, he found it difficult to practice speaking. But Jack didn't let that stop him. He found an online language exchange partner, a woman named Maria from Spain. They would talk for 30 minutes each day. Jack said that at first their conversations were slow, but as they kept talking, they got better and better. Maria helped Jack with his pronunciation, and Jack helped Maria with her grammar. After a few months, Jack's speaking skills improved a lot, and he felt much more confident in his conversations. This is a great example of how language exchange can help you practice in a real-life setting. Sometimes I also focus on learning phrasal verbs because they are so common in everyday English. For example, instead of saying look at, I try to use check out. Instead of saying leave, I say head out. I try to make these phrasal verbs a natural part of my vocabulary by using them in my writing and speaking. It might take a while to remember all of them, but it's worth the effort because they make my English sound more natural and less formal. I also enjoy writing short stories or diary entries in English. These activities are great for improving both writing and vocabulary. For example, last weekend, I wrote about a trip I took to the beach. I described everything in detail: the weather, the people, and the activities. I wrote, "The sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. I walked along the beach with my husband, David, and we collected seashells. Later, we went to a small cafe and drank cold lemonade." Writing about things that happen in your life helps you practice tenses and makes your writing more interesting. It also helps you remember new vocabulary by using it in context. I know some people struggle with learning grammar rules. It can be hard to remember all the rules, but I've found that practicing grammar through writing and speaking helps a lot. For example, when I learned how to use the present perfect tense, I wrote sentences like, "I have eaten breakfast," or "I have studied English for 2 hours today." This made it easier for me to remember the structure of the tense. I also used online quizzes to test my understanding of grammar. The key is to practice regularly. Over time, the rules will become more natural. One thing I love doing is keeping a vocabulary journal. Every time I come across a new word, I write it down along with its meaning and an example sentence. For example, I learned the word journey last week. I wrote, "A journey is a long trip or adventure." Example, "My journey to the mountains was amazing." This way, I not only remember the word, but also understand how to use it in different situations. I review my vocabulary journal every week, and this helps me retain new words. If you have time, you could also create your own language challenges. For instance, you can set a goal to learn 5 new words a day or write 10 sentences using new vocabulary. When you challenge yourself, it makes studying more fun and rewarding. You could also practice with flashcards, either physical ones or through apps. I do this regularly to help me remember new words. It's a great way to review and test your memory. Lastly, I want to remind you that consistency is the key. Even if you only study for 10 or 15 minutes a day, it adds up over time. When I first started studying English, I didn't see huge improvements right away. But after several months of small, consistent efforts, I could feel my English getting better. Now I use English every day in my job, my social life, and my personal projects. And that all started with small steps. If you want, we can keep talking about more tips for self-study. It's all about finding the methods that work best for you and staying motivated to keep improving. The journey to mastering a language is long, but with persistence, you'll get there. Keep practicing every day, and you'll continue to improve. Let's keep working together to build your skills and confidence. Let me tell you something that really changed how I study. One day, I was reading an English blog about healthy habits. It was written by a man named Thomas who lives in London. He shared his daily routine in English, and I decided to copy his idea. I started writing my own daily routine every morning in English. I would write things like, "Today I woke up at 6:30, I brushed my teeth and drank a glass of water. Then, I read a few pages of an English book. After that, I cleaned the kitchen and made breakfast." This simple activity helped me improve my writing, grammar, and vocabulary all at the same time. And it only took me 10 to 15 minutes a day. After doing that for a few weeks, I noticed that my sentences started to get longer. Before, I used to write things like, "I wake up, I eat, I go to work." But now I write, "I usually wake up at 6:30, and after brushing my teeth and washing my face, I like to sit down with a warm cup of tea and review my vocabulary notebook." You see how it becomes more natural and detailed? You can try this too. Just start with a few simple sentences about your day and slowly build it up over time. Another method I use is what I call talk to myself in English. It may sound funny, but it really helps. For example, when I'm cooking dinner, I talk about what I'm doing, like, "Now I'm chopping the onions." "Next, I will boil the rice. I need to stir the soup so it doesn't burn." Or when I'm cleaning the house, I say, "I'm vacuuming the living room. I want everything to be clean before my husband comes home." It's like turning your daily tasks into a speaking lesson. You're not just doing housework, you're practicing English at the same time. A friend from the English Pod community, his name is Richard, also shared his story with me. Richard lives in a small village and he doesn't have many people around him who speak English, but he found a great way to practice. Every evening he takes a walk and listens to English audio lessons using his earphones. While walking, he repeats what the speaker says. He listens to the sentence, pauses it, and then repeats it out loud. "The weather is nice today," he says. Then he adds his own sentence, like, "I think it might rain later, so I brought my umbrella." This shadowing technique helped Richard improve his pronunciation and fluency. He told me that after 3 months, he could speak more clearly and confidently than ever before. Let's talk a bit more about writing. I think writing is a powerful way to study English. Every week I choose one topic to write about. It could be my favorite place to relax, or what I do on weekends. I write a short paragraph about the topic. Then I read it out loud to check if it sounds natural. If I see any mistakes, I correct them. I also ask a friend, her name is Emma, to check it for me. She tells me if my grammar is correct or if I need to change some words. You don't need a teacher to do this. You can use free grammar tools online or ask someone you trust who speaks English. Do you know what else I do? I use pictures. Yes, just simple pictures. I find one photo on the internet, maybe a picture of a market or a family eating dinner, and I describe everything I see. There is a man wearing a blue shirt. He is buying vegetables. A woman is standing behind the stall. She is smiling. This activity improves your vocabulary and helps you use different verbs and adjectives. And it's also fun. You can even describe photos from your own life, maybe a photo from your wedding or a family picnic. Just look at it and talk or write about it in English. Speaking of family, let me tell you about Sarah and her husband Michael. They are both trying to learn English together. Every evening after dinner, they sit down with a cup of tea and talk only in English for 20 minutes. They talk about their day, their plans, or even what they want to cook tomorrow. When they don't know a word, they look it up and write it in their notebook. Now, both of them feel more confident speaking in English when they travel or meet new people. So if you have a family member who is also learning English, you can study together like Sarah and Michael. I also like to use English when I plan things. For example, if I need to buy groceries, I make the shopping list in English: milk, eggs, chicken, rice, carrots. When I plan my week, I write Monday, clean the house. Tuesday, call the doctor. Wednesday, finish reading my English book. These small things may not seem big, but they help you build the habit of thinking in English. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do when studying alone. Start thinking in English as much as you can. One time, I wanted to learn how to talk about feelings in English. I found it difficult to express how I felt. So I made a list of emotions: happy, tired, excited, worried, calm, and proud. Then I wrote down examples. I feel happy when I finish all my tasks for the day. I feel worried when my child is sick. I feel calm when I go for a walk in the park. Then I tried to use these sentences when talking to others or writing in my journal. After some practice, it became easy to say how I feel, even in difficult situations. Another thing that really helps is goal setting. Every Sunday night, I write my English goals for the week. It might be learn 10 new words, write 3 diary entries, practice speaking for 15 minutes a day. Then I check them off one by one. It feels so good when I finish my list at the end of the week. It also keeps me motivated. Sometimes I reward myself. If I complete all my tasks, I might enjoy a nice walk with my husband or read a new book in English. You can try this method too. It makes your learning more organized and fun. Some learners also use mirrors for practice. I do this too. I stand in front of a mirror and pretend I'm speaking to someone. I say, "Hello, how are you today?" "I'm doing well, thank you. Today I want to tell you about my job." Then I describe what I do, what I like, and what I find difficult. This helps me watch my facial expressions and body language. It also gives me more confidence when I have to speak to real people. Let me give you one more example. One day I met a woman named Helen who works as a nurse. She said she studies English every morning before work. She wakes up 30 minutes earlier and reads short stories in English. She writes new words in her notebook and reviews them during her break. She told me this small habit changed her life. Now she can speak with patients from other countries and understands them better. Her small daily habit made a big difference. You can do the same. You don't need many hours every day. Now let's talk about another thing that really helped me learn English when I studied alone. Asking and answering my own questions in English. This is something anyone can do at home, and it's a powerful way to improve your speaking and thinking skills. For example, I sit down and ask myself simple questions like, what did I do yesterday? Then I answer out loud, yesterday I cleaned the kitchen in the morning. After that, I studied English for 1 hour. In the afternoon, I went to the market with my husband and we bought fresh vegetables. In the evening, I read a few pages of an English book. You see, I don't just think these answers. I speak them out loud. This helps my brain get used to forming English sentences without needing to translate from my first language. Another helpful activity is reading out loud. Every day, I take a short story or a news article written in simple English and I read it out loud. I don't try to read fast. I focus on pronouncing each word clearly. I also listen to how my voice sounds. If I don't know how to say a word, I check it online and repeat it until it feels natural. For example, I once read a story about a man named David who started a small farm with his wife. As I read the story out loud, I repeated sentences like, David wakes up at 5 o'clock every morning. He feeds the chickens and waters the plants. His wife prepares breakfast while he finishes his work outside. Reading stories like this not only improves my pronunciation, but it also helps me understand sentence structure and learn new words in context. You can also use speaking apps to talk with yourself. I have an app where I record my voice. Every day, I choose a topic like my favorite place, my daily routine, or what I learned this week. I speak for 2 or 3 minutes and then I listen to my recording. When I listen again, I sometimes hear small mistakes or parts that sound unnatural. This helps me improve day by day. I remember one recording I made about my kitchen. I said, there is many plates on the table. But when I listened again, I realized it should be, there are many plates on the table. So I repeated the correct sentence a few times. There are many plates on the table. There are many spoons in the drawer. I noticed that listening to myself helped me correct small grammar problems that I didn't see before. Let me share with you a story about a woman named Lisa. She lives in Canada and works as a baker. She studies English alone because her job starts very early in the morning and she doesn't have time to attend a class. Lisa told me she learns by using a simple notebook. Every day, she writes 5 English sentences about her work. For example, today I baked 20 loaves of bread. I made chocolate cookies. I cleaned the oven. She writes these sentences during her lunch break. At night, she reads them out loud. She told me that after doing this for 2 months, she started speaking English more naturally with her customers. One day, a man asked her, "Do you have any fresh bread?" And she answered without thinking, "Yes, we just baked it an hour ago." She was so proud of herself, and she said it's all because of the small steps she takes every day. I also want to tell you about a very helpful technique I use, which is writing short conversations. I create a small dialogue between 2 people like this. Emma. Hi, John. How was your day? John. It was good. I worked in the garden this morning. What about you? Emma. I cleaned the house and then read a book. John. That sounds nice. What book did you read? Emma. It's a book about learning English alone. I write simple conversations like this, then I read both parts out loud. Sometimes, I even act out the scene in front of a mirror, pretending I'm both Emma and John. This helps me understand natural sentence patterns and makes me feel more confident speaking in English. Another good way to practice English alone is by giving short speeches to yourself. I pretend that I'm giving a talk or teaching someone. For example, I say, "Today I want to talk about my favorite food. My favorite food is roast chicken with rice and vegetables. I like it because it's healthy and easy to cook. I usually prepare it on weekends. First, I clean the chicken, then I add some salt, pepper, and lemon juice. After that, I put it in the oven for 1 hour." When I practice speaking like this, I also learn how to explain things step by step, which is very useful for daily conversations. Remember another friend from the English pod community? His name is Peter. He's from a small town in Australia. Peter told me that he didn't have internet for many months, but he still found ways to practice English. He had a small collection of English books, and every day he would pick one paragraph and rewrite it in his own words. For example, if the book said, "The farmer wakes up early and feeds the cows," Peter would write, "Every morning, the farmer gets up early and gives food to his cows." Then he would read his version out loud. This helped him understand how to say the same thing in different ways, which is a great skill when speaking English. Another thing I recommend is to describe things around you. Look around your room and say what you see. There is a brown table in the corner. On the table, there is a cup of tea and a small notebook. Next to the table, there is a chair with a green cushion. Doing this helps you build your vocabulary about everyday objects. I do this in every room: kitchen, living room, bathroom, and even the garden. You don't need anything special. Just look around and speak. Let me also tell you how I prepare for talking about daily life topics. Every Sunday, I choose 5 topics, like what I do in the morning, my favorite food to cook, cleaning the house, going to the store, and helping my child with homework. I write 5 to 6 sentences for each topic. Then I practice speaking them out loud. I do this every week, and now I feel ready to speak about common things without fear or stress. If I forget a word, I try to explain it in another way. That's part of learning, using what you know to communicate, even if you don't know every word. When I study English alone, I also use labels. I take small pieces of paper and write the English name of things, like fridge, door, mirror, pillow, lamp, and I stick them around my home. Every time I see one, I say the word out loud, and sometimes make a sentence like, "I need to clean the mirror," or "I turned off the lamp before sleeping." It's simple, but it helps to remember vocabulary. Another helpful thing is making a list of daily problems and writing how to solve them in English. For example, problem: the kitchen sink is leaking. Solution: I need to call the plumber. Problem: I forgot to buy rice. Solution: I will go to the store after lunch. Problem: I'm feeling tired today. Solution: I will take a short rest and drink some water. Writing and saying things like this helps you use English in a useful and realistic way. Now I want to talk about how important it is to repeat what you learn. When we study alone, we sometimes forget what we learned last week or even yesterday. So what I do is, every day before I learn something new, I review what I studied the day before. For example, if yesterday I learned the word grocery, today I try to use that word again. I say, I will go to the grocery store today, or there is a grocery store near my house. I do this with all new words and phrases. Repeating helps the words stay in my brain for a long time. I also write them down in a notebook and make simple sentences every day. One of my favorite ways to practice is to take 5 new words and make a story using them. It doesn't have to be a long story. Even something short like this is helpful. Marks woke up early. He made breakfast and then went to the grocery store. He bought eggs, milk, and bread. After shopping, he cleaned his house and rested in the afternoon. By doing this, I use the words in a real situation, and I don't forget them. Let me tell you a real story from someone in the English Pod community. His name is Tom. He lives in a small town in England and works as a driver. Tom told me that he only had time to learn English at night because he works all day. So what did he do? He made flashcards. On one side of the card, he wrote the English word like driver. On the other side, he wrote the meaning in simple English. A person who drives a car or truck. Every night before sleeping, he looked at 5 flashcards. Then he tried to make a sentence with each word. For example, I am a driver. I drive to different places every day. After 1 month, he had over 150 flashcards. He said this helped him learn fast even without a teacher. Another thing that helped me a lot is to think in English. I know, it sounds difficult at first. But you don't have to think in full sentences all the time. Start small. When I cook, I think, cut the onion, add the rice, stir the soup. When I clean my room, I think, pick up the clothes, put them in the basket, sweep the floor. These are short actions that we do every day, and if we say them in English, you can also describe your feelings. I do this often. I wake up and think, I feel tired today. I want to drink some tea. I need to plan my day. If I feel happy, I say, the sun is shining. I feel good today. I want to go for a walk. These little sentences help us practice English without needing anything. Just your mind and your day. Let's talk about another technique that works really well. Shadowing. Shadowing means listening to someone speak in English and repeating their words right away. Try this with simple audio clips or videos with clear voices. When someone says, "Good morning, how are you today?" you repeat it right after them. "Good morning, how are you today?" Try to match their voice, speed, and tone. You can even do this with stories. I once listened to a story about a man named Ben. He wakes up, makes tea, reads his book, and goes to work. I listened to that story 5 times. The first time, I just listened. The second time, I read along. The third time, I shadowed. I repeated every sentence right after the speaker. It felt like I was speaking with a friend. It was fun and very useful. Now, I want to share how I learn grammar naturally without too many rules. I learn grammar by reading and listening. For example, when I hear someone say, "She is going to the store," I ask myself, why not she go to the store? Then I remember, she needs is going. I don't open a big grammar book. I just notice how people speak and copy them. Another sentence I heard was, "They have finished their work." I thought, oh, it's not they finished, but they have finished. I keep listening to many real-life conversations and stories, and little by little, the grammar becomes more natural. Let me tell you about my friend Sarah. She is a mother of 2 children and wants to learn English to help her kids with homework. She doesn't have time for online classes, so she studies at home. What does she do? Every day she listens to one short English podcast. Then she writes 3 sentences from the podcast in her notebook. She reads them out loud, copies them, and then changes the words. For example, if she hears, John wakes up at 6 a.m., she writes, I wake up at 7 a.m., or my husband wakes up at 5:30. She changes the name, the time, and the subject. This helps her understand how sentences work and makes grammar easier for her. Let's not forget about speaking practice with objects at home. I do this activity every week. I choose one room and describe it. For example, in my living room, I say there is a sofa in the middle. It is brown and soft. Next to it, there is a small table. On the table, there is a book and a glass of water. Behind the sofa, there is a window with white curtains. I walk around and describe everything. I see. This helps me learn the names of objects and also practice using prepositions like next to, on, behind, under, and between. One more story from the English Pod community. A man named David from South Africa told me he practices English by writing letters to himself. Every night before bed, he writes a short letter. He starts with, Dear David, and then he writes about his day. For example, today was a good day. I worked in the garden. I planted tomatoes and cleaned the grass. In the evening, I made dinner with my wife. We ate rice and vegetables. I am feeling happy. He said that writing letters helped him organize his thoughts and feel more confident when speaking English. Another idea I love is telling daily stories. I tell myself what happened today like I'm telling a friend. I say, Today I woke up late. I quickly made breakfast. My husband helped me with the dishes. Then I sat down to study English. I learned 10 new words today. I also practiced speaking about my kitchen. I say all of this out loud. I sometimes even record it. It feels like I'm talking to someone. This makes my English better because I get used to expressing myself clearly. If I don't know a word, I try to describe it. For example, if I forget the word broom, I say, it is something we use to clean the floor. We hold it and move it side to side. This teaches me to speak even when I forget vocabulary. It's okay to make mistakes. The goal is to keep speaking and not stop. Another important tip I want to share is how to practice English while doing everyday tasks. I do this almost every day. For example, when I am cooking, I talk to myself in English. I say things like, I'm chopping the onions now. Next, I will fry the garlic in a pan. When I do the laundry, I think, I'm putting the clothes in the washing machine. Now I'll fold the clean clothes. Even when I am cleaning the house, I describe what I am doing. I'm sweeping the floor with a broom. The dust is going into the dustpan. By speaking to myself during these tasks, I am practicing English and I don't even realize it. It's a great way to practice every day, even when you are busy. There's another technique I use often called word association. This method is really useful because it helps me connect new words with things I already know. For example, when I first learned the word mountain, I thought of the word high. So whenever I think of mountains, I also think of the word high. It makes it easier for me to remember new vocabulary because I am linking the word with something I already understand. Another example is when I learned the word bicycle. I connected it with exercise since I associate cycling with being active. Word association creates a stronger memory and helps me recall the words quickly when I need them. Now, Let me tell you about an interesting experience that helped me a lot in learning English. A few months ago, I visited a small village in the countryside. The people there mostly spoke their local language, but some knew a little English. I spent the whole day with a man named John, who worked as a farmer. John didn't know much English, but he loved to talk. At first, I found it difficult to understand him, but I didn't let that stop me. I kept asking him questions, and he tried to answer in simple English. For example, he would say, "I grow tomatoes, I sell them at the market." When he said sell, I repeated it out loud, and I tried to use it in a sentence like, "I sell books, I sell fruit." Even though John's English wasn't perfect, we communicated well, and I learned new words and phrases by just talking with him. That experience showed me how important it is to practice speaking with real people, even if they don't speak perfect English. Speaking of speaking practice, another thing that really helped me is using language exchange apps. There are many apps where you can find people who want to learn your language, and you can practice speaking English with them. I use an app called Hello Talk. Every day, I chat with someone in English and they help me with their language. Sometimes I send voice messages, and sometimes I just text. I started talking to a woman named Lucy from Italy. She is learning English, and I am helping her with English while she helps me with Italian. We chat about all kinds of things. The great part is that we correct each other's mistakes. If I make a mistake, she points it out, and I do the same for her. This really helps me practice real conversation in English. There's a similar method I learned called role-playing. For example, I pretend to be at a restaurant and practice ordering food in English. I ask, "Can I see the menu, please?" And then I say, "I would like a sandwich with cheese." After practicing, I feel more confident when I actually go to a restaurant. Another day, I pretend to be a customer in a shop. I practice saying, "How much is this?" and "I would like to buy this shirt." Role-playing makes you ready for real-life situations because you practice speaking before you need it. I also want to talk about how I learned to improve my writing. One way I practice writing is by keeping a journal. Every day, I write about something that happened to me. For example, today I went to the park. I saw many people walking their dogs. It was a beautiful day. I had lunch with my friend Sarah. We talked about our plans for the weekend. I do this every day, even when I'm not feeling like writing. Sometimes I write about my goals, like, I want to learn 10 new words today. Writing down your thoughts helps you practice forming sentences and using new words. The more I write, the better my writing becomes. Sometimes I also like to write short stories. I start with a simple idea, like, a person goes to the store, and I build the story from there. For example, Maria walked into the store on a sunny afternoon. She needed some bread and milk for her dinner. As she picked up a loaf of bread, she noticed that there was a sale on apples. Maria smiled and picked up a bag of fresh apples. At the checkout, she paid for her items and left the store. She was happy to have everything she needed for the evening. When I write, I try to use new words I've learned. Even if my story is simple, it's a good way to practice grammar and vocabulary. One thing that always helps me stay motivated is setting small goals. For example, I set a goal to learn 20 new words every week. I use flashcards to write the new words, and every day I test myself to see if I can remember them. If I forget a word, I review it again. I keep a list of my goals and check them off when I complete them. This helps. When I'm studying English, I like to listen to podcasts or audiobooks. It's a great way to practice listening and get used to the rhythm of English. I prefer listening to stories because they teach me new words in context. For example, I listened to a story about a man named James who traveled to Paris. In the story, he talked about his experience in the city, his favorite places to visit, and the food he tried. I learned new vocabulary like monuments, tourist, and souvenir. After listening, I tried to repeat some of the sentences James used. This helped me improve both my listening and speaking skills. Lastly, I want to mention the importance of patience. Learning a language takes time, and sometimes it can be frustrating. There are days when I feel like I'm not making progress, but I remind myself that every little step counts. Even if it's just learning 5 new words or listening to an English podcast for 10 minutes, it all adds up. The key is to keep going. Don't stop, even when it gets hard. Each day is an opportunity to get better, and with time, your skills will grow. In addition to all these methods I've mentioned, one thing that truly helps me is setting a routine. I don't just study English randomly. I have a specific time every day that I dedicate to learning. For example, I wake up early in the morning and I start my day with a 15-minute listening exercise. Sometimes I listen to a podcast, sometimes an audiobook, or even a simple YouTube video. This helps me wake up my mind and prepare for the day ahead. I also have a habit of practicing speaking in the morning, even if it's just for a few minutes. I'll talk to myself about what I plan to do that day, what I want to accomplish, or even review some new vocabulary I've learned. In the evening, I like to set aside 30 minutes to read in English. It's a quiet time for me, and I choose books that interest me. Right now, I'm reading a book called The Secret Garden. It's a story about a girl named Mary who discovers a hidden garden. The book is simple, but it's great for learning new vocabulary and sentence structures. Every night, I try to read at least one chapter. If there's a word I don't know, I underline it and look it up later. I've found that reading in English improves my writing because I start noticing sentence patterns and ways words are used together. Another activity that has really helped my English is keeping a vocabulary notebook. It's not just about writing down words I don't know, though. I write sentences using those words to help me remember them better. For example, when I learned the word expand, I wrote, "I want to expand my knowledge of English by practicing every day." The next day, I might write, "The company plans to expand its business to new countries." Writing sentences helps me see how the word fits into different contexts. It also makes the word easier to remember because I'm using it in real-world examples. This technique is very powerful for building vocabulary. Sometimes I challenge myself by taking online quizzes in English. There are many websites that offer grammar, vocabulary, and listening quizzes, and I take these quizzes regularly. They give me immediate feedback, so I know where I need to improve. For example, I took a quiz on prepositions last week, and I realized I was making mistakes with words like on and in. So I went back and reviewed those grammar rules. Quizzes are a fun way to see how much you know and where you need to put more effort. One strategy I use to improve my listening skills is watching videos in English with subtitles. At first, I watched with subtitles in my own language, but now I watch with English subtitles. This helps me connect the spoken word with the written word. It also helps me hear how words are pronounced and see how they're written. For example, when I watch a video with a speaker named James talking about his travels, I focus on the way he pronounces words like adventure or landscape. Then I watch how they are spelled on the screen. Over time, this practice has improved both my listening and my ability to read and write. Another useful technique is watching videos where people talk about common topics. For example, there's a YouTube channel where a man named Robert talks about his daily routine in English. He talks about simple things like what he has for breakfast, how he goes to work, and what he does in the evening. I use these videos to practice listening to natural English conversations. Robert speaks slowly and clearly, which is perfect for beginners, and he uses everyday vocabulary. Watching this kind of content helps me learn how native speakers use simple phrases in daily life. It's very helpful when you want to sound more natural in your own conversations. A technique that works especially well for me when I am learning a new language is using the shadowing method. This involves repeating what a speaker says exactly as they say it, right after they say it. I do this with videos and podcasts. If a speaker says, "I went to the market yesterday," I immediately repeat, "I went to the market yesterday." This method helps me improve my pronunciation and intonation. It also helps me practice listening to English at a natural pace. It's a great way to get used to the rhythm and flow of the language. When it comes to speaking practice, I like to use the talking to myself method. This may sound strange, but it works. For example, when I'm walking to the store, I practice my English by talking out loud to myself. I say, "I am walking to the store. I will buy some bread, milk, and fruit." I try to keep the sentences simple, but I also challenge myself to use new words I've learned. Sometimes I talk about things that happen during the day, like, "This morning, I went to the gym. I ran for 20 minutes. It was a great workout." By practicing these little conversations with myself, I am constantly improving my ability to speak in English. When I have some free time during the day, I like to listen to TED Talks. TED Talks are short, interesting lectures on a wide range of topics. I find them really helpful for practicing both listening and learning new vocabulary. There is a speaker named Helen who talks about overcoming fear. She uses simple words and speaks clearly, so I can understand most of it. Listening to TED Talks like this helps me learn how to express my thoughts more clearly and confidently. I also get to hear different accents and learn new ways of speaking English. Along with listening and speaking, I've learned that writing emails and messages in English is another excellent way to improve my skills. I have friends who speak English, and we send each other emails and text messages every day. Writing in English helps me practice how to structure sentences, use correct grammar, and choose the right words. For example, when I'm writing to my friend Sam, I say things like, "How are you today? I hope everything is going well with you. I wanted to tell you about the book I'm reading. It's called The Great Adventure." Every time I write a message, I focus on making it as clear as possible. This practice helps me in real-life situations when I need to send professional emails or messages. Now, one last thing I want to share is how I learn English through repetition. I don't just learn new words once and forget them. I review them often. For example, every few days, I go back to my vocabulary notebook and look over the words I've written down. I repeat them in sentences and I test myself to see if I still remember them. This repetition helps me remember words for a long time, and I feel more confident using them in conversations. All of these strategies have helped me a lot in improving my English. I'm still learning every day, but I feel proud of how far I've come. The key is to find what works best for you and stick with it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because each mistake is a learning opportunity. The more you practice, the better you'll get, and soon you'll be able to speak. As I continue on my English learning journey, I've found that breaking down my practice into small, manageable tasks each day helps me stay consistent and avoid feeling overwhelmed. For example, I've made it a habit to learn 5 new words every day. This could be anything from simple adjectives to more complex verbs. To help me remember them, I not only write them down in my vocabulary notebook, but also use them in different sentences. This helps me get used to the word and how it fits into different contexts. After a few days, I review the words I've learned, and this repetition ensures I remember them long term. Sometimes I even create little stories using the new words. For instance, if I learned the word brilliant, I might write a sentence like, "The brilliant scientist discovered a cure for a rare disease." This helps me practice using the word in context. Over time, I can look back at these little stories and see how much my vocabulary has expanded. One of the biggest challenges I faced early on was learning the difference between English tenses. English tenses can be tricky, right? At first, I used to mix up the past and present tenses, and I would get confused about when to use have versus had. To tackle this, I decided to focus on one tense at a time. For example, I spent an entire week only practicing the past tense. I wrote down simple sentences about things I did the day before, like, "I went to the park," or "I ate lunch at noon." After a week, I felt much more comfortable using past tense verbs. Then, I did the same with the present tense. I focused on sentences like, "I eat breakfast every day," and "I read books in the evening." This focused practice helped me build a strong foundation in each tense before moving on to the next. I also made it a point to practice speaking out loud so I could hear myself using the tenses correctly. One activity that has significantly improved my ability to speak in English is practicing real-life conversations. I try to mimic conversations that I might have with a native speaker. For example, I imagine myself in a restaurant ordering food. I'll practice saying things like, "I would like to order the chicken salad, please," or "Could I have a glass of water?" Doing this in my mind allows me to anticipate common questions and responses I might hear. It also helps me feel more confident when I find myself in a similar situation in real life. I also take advantage of technology. There are so many language learning apps that offer conversation practice. One app that I've found useful is called Hello Talk. This app connects you with native speakers, and you can chat with them through text or voice messages. I've made a few friends through this app, and we often practice speaking with each other. My friend Anna, for example, is from the UK, and we talk about everything from daily routines to our hobbies. She corrects my grammar, and I help her with her Spanish. The app has been a great way to practice conversational English in a fun and informal way. Alongside Hello Talk, I also use Duolingo for its daily exercises. Duolingo has different levels, and I started with the basics, like greetings and simple phrases. As I got more comfortable, I moved on to more advanced topics like travel vocabulary, family relationships, and even some business-related terms. The app makes learning feel like a game, and I enjoy seeing my progress as I earn points and unlock new levels. It's a good balance between structured learning and fun, and I've definitely learned a lot from it. When it comes to reading, I like to mix it up by reading both fiction and nonfiction. For example, I recently read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. It's a simple yet magical story about a young boy named Harry who learns he is a wizard. I found this book easy to follow because the language is not too difficult, and the plot is engaging. There are also a lot of familiar words that I've come across before, so it was an enjoyable experience. On the other hand, I also enjoy reading nonfiction, such as articles and blogs about different subjects. For instance, I read an article about the benefits of meditation last week. It was a great way to expand my vocabulary while learning about a new topic. I even highlighted the new words I learned, like mindfulness, stress reduction, and relaxation techniques. By reading a variety of materials, I get to learn both practical language and more creative, descriptive language. This helps me become more flexible in my English usage, which is key for sounding natural. Now, let's talk about another tool I use: language exchange meetups. These meetups are great because I get to practice speaking with people who are also learning English. I attend these meetups once a week, and each session focuses on a specific theme, such as asking for directions, shopping, or ordering at a restaurant. During these meetups, I practice real conversations with people who are in the same boat as me. It's comforting to know that they're also learning and trying to improve their English. These sessions have built my confidence in speaking English with others, even though sometimes I still feel nervous. One of the most memorable experiences I had during a meetup was when I had to order food in English for the first time. At the beginning of my learning journey, I was nervous about speaking in public, especially in another language. But I realized that everyone at the meetup was supportive, and they weren't there to judge. They were there to learn, just like me. This encouraged me to speak without fear of making mistakes. Now I'm much more comfortable ordering food, giving directions, and having everyday conversations with others in English. Another thing I've done to improve my speaking skills is setting small speaking goals each week. For example, I might aim to have one 10-minute conversation with a native speaker in English by the end of the week. Setting small, achievable goals helps me track my progress and keep motivated. Sometimes I even use a timer to ensure that I'm speaking for the entire 10 minutes. It helps me focus, and it's also a good exercise for my listening skills, as I need to actively understand the other person's responses. I also love the idea of learning through storytelling. My friend Sarah, who is from Canada, always tells me fascinating stories about her travels. She describes her experiences in such detail, and I try to listen carefully to how she structures her sentences. After she tells me a story, I'll try to retell it in my own words, using the vocabulary and expressions she used. This method has helped me improve my ability to narrate stories in English and also expand my vocabulary. Sometimes I record myself speaking to see how much I've improved over time. I do this by reading a passage or giving a short speech on a topic I know well, such as my favorite hobby or what I did last weekend. Afterward, I listen to the recording and note any mistakes or areas where I can improve. This self-reflection helps me identify patterns in my speaking and pinpoint what I need to focus on. Lastly, one of the best ways to improve your language skills is to keep a positive attitude. I've learned to embrace the fact that mistakes are part of the process. At first, I used to get frustrated when I couldn't say something correctly or when I forgot a word. But now I understand that every mistake is a step forward in the learning process. The more mistakes I make, the more I learn. Staying patient with myself has been one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my English journey. So whether it's practicing speaking, reading, writing, or listening, the key is consistency. By incorporating English into your daily life and using these strategies, you'll see gradual improvement. Remember, learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. With patience, determination, and a little bit of fun, you'll reach your language learning goals. One thing I have learned through all my study habits is the importance of variety. Sticking to just one type of practice can be useful for a while, but over time, it gets boring. To keep things fresh, I like to mix up my methods. For instance, in the morning, I might start my day by listening to an English podcast, like the English Pod Community, to get my mind in English mode. I usually listen to an episode that focuses on something practical, like ordering at a cafe or asking for directions. This helps me start my day with some real-life language input, and it also gets me thinking in English right away. By the time I'm having breakfast, I usually feel energized, so I'll spend about 15 minutes working on vocabulary. I don't just memorize lists. I try to make the words relevant to my life. For example, if I'm learning words about travel, I'll look at recent photos I took during my travels and try to describe them using the new words I've learned. I might say, "This is a picture of the beautiful beach I visited last summer. The sand was golden and the water was crystal clear." Using new words in context, like this, makes them more memorable. And during the day, I make a habit of writing down anything I don't understand while reading or listening. For example, last week I was reading a book about photography, and I came across the word aperture. At first, I didn't know what it meant, but I wrote it down and later looked it up. I learned that it refers to the opening in a camera lens that controls how much light enters. After learning the meaning, I went online and watched a video about photography to hear how the word is used in real-life situations. The more I encounter new words in different contexts, the more familiar they become, and this helps me understand English better. One of the most rewarding things about studying alone is having the freedom to practice whenever I want. There's no pressure to schedule lessons or worry about being in a class. For example, when I'm on the bus or waiting for an appointment, I can use the time to listen to English. Even if it's just for 10 minutes, I focus on something small, like understanding a short conversation in an audio clip. I may listen to it several times, pausing to repeat parts I don't quite catch the first time. These little moments add up, and over time, they really make a difference in my comprehension skills. I also make sure I challenge myself by listening to more advanced content. When I first started learning, I would only listen to simple podcasts. But as my listening skills improved, I gradually started to listen to more complex material. One podcast I really enjoy is BBC Learning English, which provides great news stories in clear, easy-to-understand English. They also break down difficult vocabulary and idioms, making it easier for learners to understand. Sometimes, when I hear a new word or phrase, I'll pause and try to guess its meaning from the context, which helps me build critical thinking skills in English. Listening to a variety of English speakers is also a great way to improve your listening skills. For example, I sometimes listen to podcasts where the speakers have different accents. A few weeks ago, I listened to an episode of the English Pod Community where the speakers were from Australia. I wasn't used to their accent at first, but I practiced by listening carefully and repeating what they said. This helped me get used to the sounds of Australian English. Afterward, I felt much more confident understanding different English accents. As for writing, I believe that regular practice is key. One method I use to improve my writing is journaling. Every evening, I write a short diary entry about my day, usually 200-300 words. I talk about what I did, what I learned, and any new words or phrases I encountered during the day. For example, yesterday I wrote, "I met my friend Sarah for lunch at a new cafe. The food was delicious, and we had a great time talking about our favorite books. I learned the word delightful, which means something that brings joy or pleasure." Writing about my day helps me practice both vocabulary and grammar, and it also gives me the chance to reflect on what I've learned. In addition to journaling, I often participate in online forums and social media groups where people discuss various topics in English. For instance, there's a forum I visit where people share their experiences of living in different countries. I read posts about cultural differences, travel, and other interesting topics. When I feel confident, I reply to other users' posts in English, asking questions or sharing my own thoughts. This gives me the chance to practice writing in a more informal, conversational style. It also allows me to receive feedback from others, which is a great way to improve my writing. Another technique I use to improve my English is shadowing. Shadowing is when you listen to an English speaker and try to repeat what they say, mimicking their pronunciation and rhythm. I started by shadowing simple conversations from podcasts, and now I challenge myself with more complex materials, like TED Talks or interviews with native English speakers. For instance, I recently shadowed a TED Talk about time management. I paused the video every few minutes and repeated what the speaker said out loud, making sure to match their tone and pronunciation. Over time, this practice has made me feel more confident speaking English, and it has helped me improve my fluency. One thing that has really helped me with my speaking practice is finding a conversation partner. I found a language exchange partner named Tom, who is from the US, through an online language learning platform. We schedule a weekly 30-minute chat where we speak English for 15 minutes and Spanish for the other 15 minutes. Having a regular conversation partner has been invaluable because it gives me the opportunity to practice speaking in a relaxed setting. Tom helps me with my pronunciation and gives me tips on how to improve my sentence structure. It's also fun because we talk about our hobbies, interests, and personal experiences, which makes learning English feel more like a natural part of life. When I first started speaking English with Tom, I was nervous and I felt like I was making a lot of mistakes. But as we continued chatting every week, my confidence grew. Now I can express myself more freely, and I'm less afraid of making mistakes. I realize that making mistakes is part of the process, and it's the best way to learn. We're both patient with each other, and we enjoy our conversations, which makes the learning experience enjoyable rather than stressful. Aside from conversation practice, I also like to watch YouTube videos in English. I enjoy watching videos that are educational, but also engaging, like those about personal development or history. Watching videos on topics that interest me makes it easier to stay motivated. For example, I recently watched a video about the history of the English language. It was both informative and entertaining, and I learned a lot about how English evolved over the centuries. I also picked up some new vocabulary like etymology, the study of word origins, and linguistics, the scientific study of language. Watching these videos not only improves my listening skills but also helps me learn more about the language itself. Another tip I've found helpful is listening to audiobooks. I started with simple books that were easy to follow, like children's stories or books aimed at young adults. However, as my listening skills improved, I began listening to more complex books, like Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Listening to the audiobook while reading along with the text has helped me understand the rhythm and flow of English sentences. I've noticed that my ability to understand spoken English has improved, and I can now listen to more advanced materials without getting overwhelmed. A great way to make the learning process fun is by setting challenges for yourself. For example, last month I set a goal to read one English book every week. It was a challenge, but I managed to do it by setting aside 30 minutes every evening for reading. This not only improved my reading skills but also helped me develop my listening and speaking skills as I discussed the books with friends or my language exchange partner Tom. When I look back at how far I've come, it's amazing to see the progress I've made. From starting with basic phrases to now being able to have full conversations in English, it's been a rewarding journey. The key is to keep practicing, stay motivated, and use English in everyday situations. No matter how you practice, the most important thing is consistency. Keep listening, reading, writing, and speaking every day, and soon enough you'll notice that your skills have improved tremendously. Another important aspect of studying English on your own is learning to be patient with yourself. I can be a perfectionist sometimes, And in the beginning, I would get frustrated if I couldn't understand a particular word or phrase. But over time, I realized that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about progress, not perfection. One day, I couldn't understand an entire podcast episode from the English pod community because the speaker was talking so quickly, and I thought, why am I still struggling with this? But then I took a deep breath, reminded myself that everyone goes through this, and decided to try again the next day. The next time I listened to that same podcast, I was able to catch more words and phrases, and the conversation became clearer. This taught me a valuable lesson. It's okay not to get everything at once. Language learning is a gradual process, and it's essential to give yourself the space to grow. Sometimes it takes time to absorb new things, and that's perfectly fine. The important thing is to keep going, even when things seem tough. Every small step forward is still progress. I also encourage myself to try new things, especially when I feel comfortable with a certain skill level. For instance, I used to avoid speaking because I was worried about making mistakes. But then, I realized, how can I improve if I don't practice speaking? So, I started recording myself speaking in English. At first, I felt awkward, but then I realized it was a great way to track my progress. I would record myself talking about my day. At first, it was hard to listen to my own voice, but over time, I became more comfortable with it. Listening to myself helped me notice things I needed to improve, such as pronunciation or sentence structure. For example, I would hear myself say something like, "I've been to the store," instead of "I have been to the store." These small mistakes helped me refine my speaking skills and helped me become more aware of the areas I needed to work on. It's also great because it lets me hear myself speaking English in real time, which boosts my confidence and shows how much progress I've made. I can't stress enough how important it is to get comfortable with making mistakes. For example, last week I was speaking to my language exchange partner, Tom, and I mixed up the words borrow and lend. I said, "Can I lend you some money?" when I actually wanted to say, "Can I borrow some money?" Tom laughed, and we both had a good time with it. Mistakes like these are part of the learning process, and they shouldn't make you feel discouraged. Instead, they are opportunities for improvement. When it comes to writing, I find that consistency is key. I mentioned before that I like to keep a journal, and that's a habit I've been sticking with. But what I also do is review my old journal entries. Every few weeks I go back and read what I wrote earlier, and I compare it to what I can write now. It's amazing how much progress I've made, and it's a good way to see how far I've come. You'll notice that your vocabulary grows, your sentences become more complex, and your grammar starts to improve. For example, a few months ago I wrote something like, "I am go to the park with my husband yesterday." Now I can write, "Yesterday I went to the park with my husband." This improvement in my writing gives me confidence and motivates me to continue. And the best part is, it's a real measurable way to see the improvement in my language skills. In addition to journaling, I also like to write short stories. I challenge myself to write about something I've never written about before. This could be a fictional story, or it could be a reflection on a past experience. Writing stories not only helps me practice vocabulary and grammar, but also stretches my creativity. For example, I once wrote a short story about a trip to a mysterious town, which allowed me to practice vocabulary related to places, travel, and emotions. It's a fun way to use English in a more creative, free-flowing way. When I look at the stories I wrote a few months ago and compare them to what I write now, I see a huge improvement. My sentences are longer, my word choice is richer, and my ideas are clearer. This type of writing practice has really helped me improve my writing skills, and I highly recommend it. It's not just about writing perfect sentences, it's about experimenting with language and pushing yourself to use English in different ways. Another great tool for improving both listening and writing is reading aloud. I do this every day, whether I'm reading an article online, a chapter from a book, or a news story. When I read aloud, I pay attention to my pronunciation and try to mimic the flow and rhythm of the sentences. This practice has helped me become more confident in my speaking skills, as it improves my pronunciation and fluency. I also like to record myself reading, which is similar to the speaking practice I mentioned earlier. By listening to the recordings, I can hear myself improve over time. Sometimes I even challenge myself by reading something difficult, like an article with advanced vocabulary, and try to read it without stopping. This practice helps me build my vocabulary and enhances my comprehension of complex materials. Now, I also use language apps to improve my grammar. While it's important to practice speaking, listening, and writing, grammar plays a big role in making sure you sound natural in English. For example, I use a grammar app to practice tenses, word order, and other grammar points I find challenging. These apps give me short exercises that I can do whenever I have a few minutes of free time. This means that I can practice grammar on the go, whether I'm waiting in line at the store or during a break at work. Another useful strategy is setting small, realistic goals. One month, I set a goal to learn 50 new words related to travel, and I made sure to use them in my conversations with Tom. This goal was achievable, and it helped me stay motivated. I also set goals for my listening practice, like listening to a podcast every morning or reading one article a day in English. By setting small goals, I've been able to track my progress and stay focused on improving. Something that has really helped me improve my skills is getting feedback. As I mentioned before, I have a language exchange partner, Tom. He's great at pointing out areas where I need to improve, whether it's my grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation. Sometimes we will do a language correction session where he listens to me speaking and gives me suggestions for improvement. Getting feedback from someone else is invaluable because it helps me spot mistakes I might not have noticed myself. In the past, I used to be afraid of making mistakes in front of others, but now I see it as an opportunity to learn. Tom's feedback is constructive, and I never feel embarrassed when he points out something I can improve. Instead, I appreciate it because it helps me get better. It's also great to know that I'm not alone in this journey of learning English. Besides language exchange, I've found that interacting with other learners is also helpful. There are many online communities like forums or Facebook groups where people share their experiences and help each other. I joined a few of these groups, and it's amazing how supportive everyone is. We share tips, encourage each other, and ask questions. Sometimes people post questions that I can answer, and that helps me solidify my own understanding of English. It's a great way to learn from others and help someone else along the way. To keep myself motivated, I also celebrate small achievements. For example, when I finish reading a book in English or when I understand a podcast episode without looking up any words, I take a moment to recognize that achievement. Celebrating the little victories keeps me motivated and reminds me of how much progress I've made. It's easy to get discouraged, but recognizing small wins helps keep things in perspective. Another fun way to improve is by playing language games. For example, I play word association games where I say a word, and then I think of another word that's related to it. For instance, if I say beach, I might follow it with sun, vacation, or sand. These types of games help me think in English and come up with words quickly, which is important for fluency. The last thing I want to mention is the importance of taking breaks. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed with all the studying, and I have to remind myself that it's okay to take a break. During these breaks, I do something fun that doesn't involve English, like going for a walk or spending time with my family. Taking breaks helps me refresh my mind and come back to my studies feeling more energized. One thing I've found to be extremely helpful when studying English alone is having a structured plan for each day. This doesn't mean a strict, rigid schedule, but more of a guideline. For instance, I try to spend at least 30 minutes each morning practicing listening skills by listening to podcasts, like the ones from the English Pod community. I start with something simple and work my way up. Some days I listen to a short beginner-level podcast, and other days I challenge myself with something a little more difficult. For me, this variety helps keep things interesting and keeps me motivated. And the best part is that I get to control my learning pace. I don't have to rush to meet anyone else's expectations, and I can go back to any material that I didn't fully understand the first time. Then, I spend another 20 to 30 minutes writing in my journal. Writing is another skill that has become so important in my journey. I remember when I first started keeping a journal, I would only write a few simple sentences like, "Today I went to the park," or "I like coffee." But over time, I pushed myself to describe my day in more detail. I would write about how I felt when I went to the park, what I saw, and what I thought about while I was there. It might sound a bit silly, but this has really helped me expand my vocabulary and improve my sentence structure. It also helps me get used to thinking in English, which is something I struggled with early on. Writing in my journal has become a habit, and it's something I do every day. Even if I'm busy, I make time for it. Sometimes I write about my goals for the day, sometimes about what happened in my life, and sometimes about my thoughts or opinions on a topic. It's amazing how much my writing has improved over time. And looking back at older entries shows me how much progress I've made. If you're just starting out, I encourage you to do the same. It's not about writing perfectly. It's about getting comfortable with writing and expressing yourself in English. Speaking of speaking, let's talk about how important it is to practice speaking when you're studying alone. I used to feel really self-conscious about speaking in English. In fact, I would often avoid it because I didn't want to make mistakes. But I realized that speaking is just as important as listening and writing. So I started finding ways to practice speaking, even if it felt a little uncomfortable at first.